Now that we know what the histogram represents, we should take a look at one of the most common ways to change the tonal values in an image, and that's using a levels adjustment layer. First, we'll make a global change to extend the dynamic range of the photo, and then we'll add a local adjustment to the painted sign area here in the building. So if we look at the histogram, we can see that this image doesn't take advantage of the full dynamic range. So I have no real blacks in the image, nor do I have any whites. So from the bottom of the layers panel, I'll click on the adjustment layer icon and add a levels adjustment layer. We can see in the properties panel that we get a histogram and that it looks like the same histogram as we see in the histogram panel. We can start by clicking the Auto button if we want Photoshop to automatically extend the dynamic range of the histogram for us. But if we look at where the black point and the white point triangles are, we can see that anything to the right of the white point and anything to the left of the black point have actually been clipped. So Photoshop is going to clip a small percentage of the pixels in my image to pure black or pure white. And that's typically because there might be just some little small abnormalities in the image, like a specular highlight, where it's going to say, okay, I'm making a judgment call, that can go to pure white. But of course, we have control over all of that. If I use the flyout menu and I choose the auto options, or if I just hold down the Option or the Alt key and click on auto, now I get all of the auto color correction options. So we can try these different algorithms or different ways to correct the image. If I choose the Enhance Monochromatic Contrast, Photoshop's just going to set the black and white points for me, and it's actually doing that for each channel identically, so we won't get any changes in color. If I use Enhance Per Channel Contrast, it's actually going to go into each channel, like your red, green, and blue channel, and it's going to clip each one of those histograms. And so you can actually get some color shifts if you use this option. Now, finding the dark and light colors, Photoshop's actually analyzing the image, and it's using the colors that it finds in the dark areas and the light areas for the shadow and highlight colors. So again, it might change the colors in your shadows and highlights. And the Enhance Brightness and Contrast, well, it also analyzes the images, but it's not going to cause any color shifts. So we can select any of these and just see how they look. We can also choose to enable the Snap Neutral Midtones, which will try to take the values that are in the midtone of your image and remove any color cast from them. So we can click through them and see if we prefer it with or without. And remember, I mentioned just clipping a small percentage. These are the values that it's clipping, so 0.1%. Of course, you can go in here and change these if you prefer a different auto setting and then save it as defaults, but for now, I'll just cancel out. I'm going to reset the auto options by clicking on the reset icon in the properties panel and show you how to do this manually. If I hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on Windows and start dragging the black point slider here, we can start to see part of the image appear, and it's going to do so in different color values. So as I bring this over, as soon as I start seeing like that yellow area down at the bottom right, that tells me that that area is being clipped to pure black, but it's only in one of the channels. So it's not until I actually see black in the image in the preview area there that I'm actually clipping all three channels to black. So really, it just depends on whether or not you want detail in the windows, if that is important to you or not. For me, I would move this over, but I don't want to move it over so far so that I start seeing black, for example, in this area. I want detail, so I'll just back that off a bit. All right, then I'll hold down the Option, the Alt key, and do the same thing on the right-hand side. Again, paying attention to where in the preview I get a white preview, because that tells me that it's clipping all to pure white. So I'm going to back off on that because I certainly don't want that door area here or the sign area here to be without detail. All right, now we also have a middle point slider here where we can adjust the gamma of the image, making it lighter or darker. And here's the interesting thing. If we compare the histograms now that we've made changes to them and I've set my black and white point here, we see the result of that in the histogram panel. And you'll notice that there's a bunch of gaps in this histogram. That's because I'm working with an 8-bit image, and the 8-bit image was flat. So when I expanded the dynamic range, it had to take those values and expand them across the entire histogram. And that's why I'm getting these gaps. If I was working with a 16-bit image, we wouldn't see those gaps as evidently because there would be more data to work with and more information and more color and tonal values to shuffle around. And that's why people work with 16-bit, so they can have that additional overhead when making edits. All right, let's toggle on and off the visibility. So that was before and that's after. I think you can see that the image is looking a lot better. It kind of pops with that additional contrast. Now let's zoom in. I'm going to use Command plus and then use the space bar so that we can see this sign area. Then I'll make a quick selection with my polygonal lasso tool. I'll just click on the corners here where the building's been painted. We could always go in and refine this later, but for the sake of brevity, let's say that's what we want to select. So this time when I add my second levels adjustment layer, Photoshop will automatically convert that selection into a mask. Now we can see wherever I make changes, it's only going to be visible where the mask is white. So in this case, not only do I want to make that area a little bit darker, I also want to change the color. And I can do that by using these individual channels. If I go into the red channel, for example, and move it over to the right, I'm actually adding the opposite of red, which is cyan. If I want to make it more red, I can move it over to the left. Now I'm using the midtone slider, but of course I could also go in with any of these sliders and make changes. I'm just going to quickly select green, and then again, moving to the left would make it more yellow, but moving to the right is going to kind of give it a little bit more of a magenta cast because magenta is opposite from green. So not only can we use the levels adjustment layer to change the tonality of our image, we can also go in and change the color. Now, in order to soften the edges, I will click on the mask icon and add just a small feather. And then I would go in here and probably make a little bit more accurate selections than I'm going to make right now. But again, for the sake of time, I'll just quickly select these window areas where there's a little bit of a levels adjustment, and I don't really want it to be because of course, these windows weren't actually painted. So I'll select those areas quickly, then choose Edit. We can fill that. I'll fill it with black, deselect, and then just grab my paintbrush here and get a little bit smaller of a brush, again, making sure that I'm painting with black and just paint it out of that upper window area. All right, so here's a little before and after. And if I zoom out using Command 0 on Mac or Control 0 on Windows and hold down the Option key and click on the eye icon next to the background, there's a before and after using both of the adjustment layers. So there you go, an easy way to improve an image by increasing the dynamic range, as well as enhancing and drawing attention to a specific area using an adjustment layer with a mask in Photoshop.